Hi everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill. A couple of weeks ago I wrote a garden column about growing potatoes, and I wrote it early because I wanted to make sure folks had the information they needed to know about planting them. And at the time it was too cold for me to plant them in my garden, but I finally get to plant them tomorrow. So I wanted to give you a little bit of some introductory information, and then tomorrow we'll get them planted. You've probably already noticed that my garden is looking quite a bit different, and that's because we're getting closer and closer to when we can plant the whole garden, and that is so exciting. So far I have the cool season crops planted, except for those potatoes, and so I wanted to show you what I'm going to do this year as far as where I'm planting them and how I'm planting them. Just like last year, I'm going to plant potatoes in containers. I've got 3 cloth grow bags here, and then I also have 2 really big black pots, and so I'm going to grow the potatoes in here, but I also ended up with this bed being available, so I'm going to plant more potatoes in here because we love potatoes. So that's the game plan, and tomorrow I'll show you how they get planted. Before you can plant potatoes, the soil needs to be at least 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And so I just put this soil thermometer into the bed about 6 to 8 inches deep. And I don't know if you can see this, but it's showing that the temperature is 60 degrees. So we are in good shape. When growing potatoes, it's a good idea to start out with seed potatoes. You can find them at garden centers and online, and it means that they are certified to be disease-free, and that is important. Now, I did buy some seed potatoes from our local garden center, but the other thing I did is I saved some potatoes from last year's harvest. And that's because this particular variety, which is called Bluebell, is one that you cannot buy in the United States anymore, and we think they're fabulous. So I don't mean to be bragging that we have these, but we did hold back some so that we could use them this year. Now, if you're wondering why in the world these are sitting in an egg carton, that's because I am chitting them, which is a British term. And what it means is pre-sprouting the potatoes for a few weeks ahead of time by exposing them to some light. And if you think about potatoes that you've forgotten about and they have those long white sprouts, you'll notice these are very different. They've got short sprouts with green on them, and these guys are ready to be planted, so I'm excited to plant them tomorrow. Now, I also wanted to show you that I bought this organic seed potato. To be honest, I prefer organic, and that's because I know that conventionally grown potatoes are treated with a lot of chemicals, and I don't want to eat those. So I went to our local garden center, and I was tickled to see that they were carrying organic seed potatoes. This one is called Minnesota, and I have never grown it before, but they are really nice looking potatoes. So let me take them out of the bag, and then I want to show you how I'm going to prepare them for planting. Well, this is embarrassing. I thought I had turned the camera on, and now you're going to wonder why all these pieces are cut up. That is my mistake. So what I wanted to point out is that on potatoes, you will see little divots, if you will, where sprouts are coming from, and those are called the eyes. So here's one, looks like another one will come from there. Here's another one. You can see multiple divots. So eyes, that's where the sprouts are going to come from as your potato grows. Well, I had 5 potatoes here, and I want 10 for the raised bed. So I cut them into pieces, and for each piece, if you have to do the same thing, what you're looking for is to have at least 2 eyes on each piece. So keep that in mind. And you know, the inside of a cut potato is very moist. And so if I were to plant them in the ground right now, it's likely that at least some of them will rot in the ground, and you don't want that. So what I'm going to do is let these sit out overnight. They will scab over, which will make them a nice dry surface. and then I'll plant them out in the garden. So I just wanted to clarify that if you have a good sized potato and you want to have a lot of plants, you can cut it up. Just make sure each piece has at least 2 eyes. Hooray, it's potato planting day. And as my luck would have it, we're in the middle of another nasty windstorm. These are really getting old, but I really want to get those potatoes in the ground, especially the ones that are cut. Now, I was thinking about what I mentioned to you yesterday about seed potatoes and cutting them into pieces, which is a very standard practice. But I also wanted to mention something that I usually do. If I'm buying seed potatoes at a garden center and I can pick through them in a bin, what I will do is typically buy small seed potatoes, keep them whole, and plant them whole. So there's even less of a chance of the pieces rotting in the ground. And I don't want you to worry. I don't think rotting happens all that often, but it is something that I wanted you to keep in mind. Now what I like to do when I'm planting seed potatoes is to lay them about where they're going to go, although I'm going to plant the rows here and here, but to space them so I know where to put them as I'm going along. I like to plant them about 1 foot apart and about 6 inches deep in the soil. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I've also made a label so I'll remember these are Minnesota potatoes. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is try to have your sprouts pointing up because that's important. I wouldn't put the cut side up if you have cut yours. There's one. It's also important to try not to knock off the sprouts while you're planting as well. It's so exciting to get them in the ground. Okay, I have planted this bed with 2 rows of potatoes, and now I'm ready to move on to the containers. But I do want to mention something that's very important wherever you're growing potatoes, whether it's in a bed, in the ground, or in a container. After you let them grow for a while, what you want to do is cover the soil surface with a thick mulch. I'm talking about things like grass clippings from a lawn that hasn't been treated with herbicides like weed and feed, shredded leaves, straw, anything along those lines. What you're trying to do is cover the soil surface so that if there are any potatoes that are developing right at the surface, the sun will not hit them, because what happens is the potatoes form a natural chemical called solanine, and it is harmful to consume. So that's why you want to make sure you do it. So I'm going to let the potatoes grow for a bit, and then I will do some heavy mulching. Now in the containers, what I've done is I've already put a little bit of screened compost and some leaves in the bottom. And you probably have noticed these tubes here. So Bill, bless his heart, created a little drip system for them so that whenever the drip system runs on the bed, the potatoes in the containers are also watered, which is slick. And actually we have one more that he's going to do so this one gets watered, because this year we're doing 5 containers on the outside of the raised bed, and last year we did 4. So he'll add one more line to it. But you know, using containers is a great way to expand the footprint of your garden. It gives you more growing space, which all of us gardeners like, right? So let's do the containers next. It's always tricky filming into a container when you've got the sun overhead, because I've got this big shady area here, but I'll do my best. I just wanted to explain what the process is for planting potatoes in containers. So what I did in this container and also in the cloth grow bags is I put a thick layer of leaves at the very bottom, and that's because there are large drainage holes in this pot. And so I thought that way I can block the holes a little bit so that the compost and the potting soil in here does not run out every time we water. And for now, I've just got the drip system sitting on top of the soil. We'll adjust it as we fill this up. So I've got some little chitted seed potatoes here, and I'm just going to poke them into the soil. And I wanted to clarify, so the whole point of chitting or pre-sprouting seed potatoes is to give them a jump start. They should hit the ground running. So I'm just putting 5 in. I know that's kind of a lot, but they're really little potatoes, and I'm thinking that maybe it'll be just fine. So I've poked them into the soil a bit. I'm going to put about 2 inches of potting soil on the top. It's an organic mix that I'm using. And then I'm going to let the plants grow until they're about 6 inches above the surface of the soil. Then I'm going to add another layer of soil to where just the tips of the leaves are emerging from the top of the soil. Then I'm going to let them grow again, about the same amount, and fill in the soil again. So eventually I will end up with a pot filled to probably about here. And then, like I mentioned with the raised bed, at that point I'm going to put a mulch on the top to protect any potatoes developing near the surface. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the potting soil into this container and the other ones. And again, just a couple of inches is all that's necessary at this point. So I'll do that to all 5 containers, and then I'm going to water them in and wait for them to grow. There's another way you can plant potatoes, and it's very similar to what we just did with the containers. Either in the ground or in a raised bed, you would dig a deep trench. Plant your potatoes at the same spacing as what I did here, which was about 1 foot, down in the bottom of the trench. Cover them with a couple of inches of soil. Let them grow about 6 inches tall, and then add in more soil to the trench to cover all but the top of the sprouts. Then you're going to let them grow for a while. Do the same thing. Let them grow another 6 inches. Fill in around the plants to just below where the top of the leaves are, and let them grow. No matter what, remember to do that mulch once you're finished filling in the trench, because you do not want those surface potatoes to get hit by the sun. So as you can see, growing potatoes is really not all that hard once you understand the basics. I plan to give you updates on how they're doing and anything that I do to the potatoes so that you get the whole picture all the way through the season. And of course, then there's the harvest in the fall, which is always something to look forward to. Now, throughout the growing season, usually once a month, I do sort of a virtual tour of my garden, highlighting how things are growing, if any problems have come up, how I'm dealing with them, and so on. So you can have those to look forward to in the coming months. Thanks so much for watching today, everybody. I'll see you next week. Now, before I go, I want to remind you that I have a brand new book, the Vegetable Garden Pest Handbook, coming out on April 27. This is the guide that gardeners have been needing for ages, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. In the first chapter, I write about all of the things you can do to keep your plants healthy and productive and better able to withstand pest attacks. The second chapter is all about the bugs. In it, you'll find a huge diagnostic chart where you go to the name of the crop that you're growing, read through the descriptions of the type of damage that crop might get, and that in turn points you to the different types of pests that could cause that damage. Then you go to the pest profiles where you'll see photos of those bugs, a description of them, what their life cycle is, the vegetable crops they're most commonly seen on, who their natural predators are, because that's really important information, and then a list of organic methods and products you can use to control those pests. There's also a chart on beneficial bugs, because I wanted you to be able to recognize them in your garden since they do so much good for us. who they prey on, and how to attract more of them to your garden. The third chapter is about organic products and DIY projects. So the organic products have detailed descriptions that tell you when to use them, how they work, which insects they control, and if there are any cautionary bits of information that you should know. The DIY projects include traps and barriers, things like insect hotels to attract more beneficial bugs to your garden, a covered raised bed, and row cover hoops for floating row cover. So this is going to be such a great resource for you. Now, if you pre-order it before April 27th, you'll get my bonus content, Susan's top tips for growing the vegetables that everybody loves. All you have to do is email me your order confirmation. My email address is susan@susansinthegarden.com, and I'll send you a link to it. But be sure to get your copy because you will be referring to it often.